The streets of Bogotá pulsed with chants, banners, and a sea of red, green, black, and white. On the second anniversary of the October 7th attacks that shook Israel and ignited one of the deadliest phases of the Gaza conflict, Colombians gathered in the heart of their capital to march in solidarity with the Palestinian people. The marchers, many of them young students, long-time human rights advocates, and ordinary citizens, we are facing a genocide. Who is not outraged by a rifle against an innocent child of 5, 3 years, 9 years, 15 years? It is outrageous. It is simply unfair. Well, on October 7th, 2 years ago today, it simply intensified the Palestinians' fight against Zionism. But the struggle actually dates back 70 years since they were forcibly removed from their lands. Came together in Bolívar Square and along the main avenues carrying Palestinian flags so large they rippled like waves above their heads. The demonstration, which stretched over several kilometers, was as much a reflection of Colombia's own political climate as it was a call for global accountability. Graffiti on bridges and walls in the city's central districts read phrases like "Bogotá es Palestina," "Bogotá is Palestine," and "Israel asesino," Israel murderer. Protesters burned a US flag emblazoned with skulls and Nazi symbols, a dramatic act meant to accuse Washington of complicity in what many here describe as war crimes. In the words spray-painted by demonstrators, the United States and other Western powers were not mere bystanders, but accomplices. Names like that of French President Emmanuel Macron appeared alongside these accusations, revealing how far the protesters' anger extended beyond the immediate conflict. For many in the crowd, this was not just a political gesture, but a moral imperative. Erika Castaneira, a Colombian editor who joined the march, stood with a handmade sign and spoke with raw emotion. "We are facing a genocide. Who is not outraged by a rifle against an innocent child of 5, 3 years, 9 years, 15 years? It is outrageous. It is simply unfair." Her words echoed through the crowd, resonating particularly with those who felt that the world has failed to shield the most vulnerable from the horrors of modern warfare. Castaneira reminded those listening that while the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel 2 years ago marked a deadly turning point, the Palestinian struggle itself spans generations. On October 7th, 2 years ago today, it simply intensified the Palestinians' fight against Zionism, she said. But the struggle actually dates back 70 years since they were forcibly removed from their lands. Her reference to decades of dispossession underscored the long arc of grievance that has made Gaza not only a battlefield, but a symbol of protracted injustice for many around the world. The demonstrators' grievances were not only directed outward. In their speeches and chants, there was also a reflection of Colombia's evolving stance on global conflicts. President Gustavo Petro, who has frequently criticized Israeli policies and called for international accountability, has framed the Palestinian cause as a test of humanity's moral compass. For protesters like lawyer Juan Fernando Romero, this framing resonated deeply. In solidarity with the Palestinian people who are being massacred by imperialism and Zionism, Romero declared, "It is an act of solidarity because I understand, as President Petro has said, that humanity itself is at stake there." Romero's words captured the essence of what drew thousands of Colombians into the streets on this day, the sense that Gaza is no longer a distant conflict, but a mirror reflecting questions about justice, oppression, and the responsibilities of powerful nations. He continued, "It is not new. What is happening now is the final dimension of how they have wanted to mistreat the Palestinian people, destroy them, and incorporate into that territory a colonialist, genocidal state like the Israeli state." Well, in solidarity with the Palestinian people who are being massacred by imperialism and Zionism. Thus, it is an act of solidarity because I understand, as President Petro has said, that humanity itself is at stake there. It is not new. What is happening now is the final dimension of how they have wanted to mistreat the Palestinian people, destroy them and incorporate into that territory a colonialist, genocidal state like the Israeli state. The protests unfolded in waves. Along Avenida Jimenez and near Plaza de Bolívar, long rows of marchers advanced shoulder to shoulder, their steps keeping time with the rhythmic beat of drums. Young activists climbed onto statues and overpasses to wave Palestinian flags high above the crowds. In one striking moment, a protester stood draped in the Palestinian flag atop a bridge, looking down as marchers below chanted slogans calling for an end to the violence. Around him, others used spray cans to scrawl defiant messages, USA complice, Macron complice. This act of graffiti, as controversial as it was, embodied the raw anger that many in the crowd expressed toward foreign leaders seen as enablers of Israel's military campaign. The symbolic burning of the US flag drew gasps and applause in equal measure. To the protesters, the skulls and Nazi insignia painted on the flag were not just provocations, but accusations that Western support had emboldened policies they view as genocidal. For international observers, it was a reminder of how far public sentiment in some corners of Latin America has shifted against Washington's role in the Middle East conflict. As the march moved closer to Bolívar Square, the historic heart of Bogotá, the atmosphere shifted from raw anger to solemn determination. Here, beneath the imposing statue of Simón Bolívar, demonstrators unfurled a massive banner that read simply, "Alto al genocidio," "Stop the genocide." A young man climbed the statue itself, waving a Palestinian flag that fluttered above the crowd. The moment, captured by cameras and smartphones alike, seemed to crystallize the purpose of the day, to show that solidarity knows no borders. Throughout the rally, speakers invoked not only the suffering of Palestinian civilians, but also the broader failures of the international community to prevent atrocities. Castaneira's voice returned to this theme in interviews after the march. She described how, in her view, international law has been bent to accommodate the powerful while leaving the powerless to fend for themselves. Her words, translated into multiple languages on social media, spread far beyond the square where they were first spoken. For Colombia, a nation with its own long history of conflict and reconciliation, the march carried an added weight. Many protesters drew parallels between the displacement of Palestinians and the displacement of rural Colombian communities during decades of civil war. Activists said these experiences gave Colombians a particular empathy for families forced from their homes by violence and for children caught in conflicts they did not create. Observers noted that the scale of the protest, thousands filling Bogotá's central plazas, marked one of the largest pro-Palestinian demonstrations in Latin America since the start of the current Gaza conflict. Analysts suggested that it reflected not only solidarity, but also frustration. Frustration that 2 years after the Hamas attack and the Israeli military response, the cycle of violence has persisted with no clear path to peace. In conversations with reporters, several participants emphasized that their protest was directed against policies, not peoples. "This is about justice and humanity," one student marcher said, "not about religion or ethnicity." Another protester argued that opposing the Israeli government's actions does not mean denying Israel's right to exist, but rather calling for an end to what they described as systemic oppression of Palestinians.
Que ustedes ven que el paramilitarismo colombiano que es sionista,
The day's events unfolded peacefully for the most part, with only minor scuffles reported near the edges of the march where graffiti was being sprayed. Local police maintained a visible but restrained presence, allowing the demonstration to proceed without major clashes. By nightfall, as candles were lit in Bolívar Square, in memory of those killed in Gaza over the past 2 years, the march had transformed into a vigil, somber, quiet, yet resolute. For journalists covering the demonstration, the stories told by participants revealed a tapestry of motivations: moral outrage at images of wounded children, historical memory of Colombia's own traumas, political alignment with President Petro's outspoken stance, and a growing sense that Latin America must play a more active role in global debates about war and human rights. International reactions to the march were swift. Israeli officials dismissed the accusations of genocide as baseless and condemned the burning of their allies' flags as incitement. Pro-Palestinian groups abroad, however, hailed the demonstration as evidence of widening global awareness and pressure on Western governments to reconsider their military and diplomatic support for Israel. As the anniversary drew to a close, the streets of Bogota returned to their usual evening rhythms, but the images of the day lingered, the vast Palestinian flags rippling over marchers' heads, the graffiti accusing powerful nations of complicity, the solemn faces of parents holding photos of children killed in Gaza. For those who participated, it was more than a protest. It was a statement that even thousands of miles away from the Middle East, they would not remain silent in the face of what they see as one of the defining moral crises of our time. The march in Bogota thus became part of a broader story, of a global movement demanding accountability, of voices from the global south joining a debate often dominated by the world's largest powers. Whether or not it shifts policy in Washington, Paris or Tel Aviv, the protest made clear that the conflict in Gaza is not just a regional struggle, but a question of conscience for people around the world. As night fell over Bolívar Square, the last words spoken from the impromptu stage were a plea for unity. A community leader called on Colombians to continue raising their voices, not in hatred, but in the hope that a just and lasting peace might still be achieved. His call was met not with applause, but with a moment of silence, an acknowledgement that behind the chants and slogans lies a profound grief shared across borders.
Macron cómplice también.
Nuestros compañeros y compañeras de lucha por la libertad de Palestina.
Un inmenso abrazo y gratitud a la resistencia palestina para engañar, porque no le han permitido al hermoso pueblo de Palestina.
Su voz, su mano.